What's up, everybody? Andrew Gould here. Today we're going to be talking about some essential changes, breaking them down, and going over different ways to further internalize them so we can play more fluently over jazz standards. So one common problem that I find among students is that we're not familiar enough with these common bits of chord progressions. So I found that one really effective way to help gain more fluency through these chord progressions is to isolate them and work on them with using our ears. So all the phrases that we're going to be checking out today is from my latest release with JLV entitled Essential Changes. Feel free to use the code AG5 for $5 off. You can find the link for that in the description below. So for our purposes, essential changes are just common short chord progressions. Let's check out All the Things You Are as an example. So if we take just the first 4 bars of All the Things You Are, we start on the minor 6 chord, then we go to the minor 2, dominant 5, and then we resolve to the 1 chord. So this chord progression is one that we also see in the tune Fly Me to the Moon, the first 4 bars of that tune. In Fly Me to the Moon, we also start with a minor 6, then go to the minor 2, dominant 5, 1 chord. It's just in a different key. So another really cool thing is not only does this common chord progression happen in other tunes, but it literally happens again later on in the form of All the Things You Are. We're just in a different key. So even just talking about this little short chord progression and how it happens twice in All the Things You Are, and we've identified this one example of it happening in Fly Me to the Moon, we can see how important and how commonly just this one little bit comes up. And the more easily we can recognize these short chord progressions, the more easily we can pick up new tunes, learn them faster, and of course improvise over them more clearly as well. So now let's dig a little bit further into this chord progression on All the Things You Are. So with this first example, one of the things that I tried to do was outline each chord clearly using nothing but the arpeggio notes from that chord. And for me, I find that to be one of the most helpful ways to really get the sound of the chord progression in my ears. If you stick with just the arpeggio notes, you can't go wrong. So on this first chord here, we have a D minor 7, and I started on a C, which is literally just the flat 7 of that chord. I then go down to an A, the 5th, F, flat 3, and then down to the root, which is D. And then I come straight back up that same exact arpeggio again. So really we can look at this as a descending minor 7 arpeggio, and then an ascending one right after that. And that's all this whole first bar is. From there, we get right into the next chord, which is G minor 7, by resolving down a whole step from the C, right down to the minor 3rd of the G minor 7, that B flat. And that B flat is really one of the most, if not the most defining notes of that chord, because it's the flat 3, and that's what makes a minor chord, literally a minor chord. So we go from that B flat up to the F natural, which is the flat 7. Again, the other defining note of that minor chord is the flat 7 too. So we're defining minor just within those first 2 notes, going down then to the D, which is the 5th, back down to the flat 3rd, B flat, root, G, down to D again, coming up to this flat 7, the F, and then resolving right down a half step into the E, which is the 3rd of the C7. And that's, again, one of the defining notes of a dominant chord is the major 3rd and then the flat 7, which we see a little bit later in the bar, where we go 3, E, 5, G, up to the root, C, and then down to the flat 7. So we start on the 3rd, and we end that little line on the flat 7, clearly outlining nothing but the notes in that C7 arpeggio. Getting into the next bar, we have a little pickup that goes G, B flat, C, that's 5, flat 7, 1, and then resolving right onto the major 3rd of the F major, that's A, then up to the 5th, C, and then finally ending our line on the root, F. So as you can see on these changes, we've used nothing but the root, 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th to clearly outline the sound of each chord change and voice lead clearly from one chord change into the next. All right, so let's check out what this line sounds like slowly now. And a little faster. So for our next example, we're going to look at the first 4 measures of conformation. And this one is really cool and interesting because we have just a little bit more harmonic motion happening. So one thing about the conformation example here that's easy, especially, is we start on the 1 chord. And I look at this whole progression as a way to get from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, which occurs in bar 5. And by doing that, we have a series of 2/5s that lead us along the way. So we start on the 1 chord. In this case, it's D major. We go down just a half step to our C sharp half diminished 7, and then our F sharp 7 flat 9, which serve as just a minor 2/5 of our 6th chord, which we then resolve to in bar 3. That 6th chord then also functions as being a 2 to then the 5, the E7 of our 2 chord, which is in bar 4, the A minor 7, which of course is then the 2, and the D7 is our 5 of our 4 chord, which we fully resolve to in bar 5. So since there's so much chord motion happening here, one of the things I find most helpful is to literally just play the roots and hear the motion of each root consecutively. So another common spot where you'll see this exact same chord progression is in the tune Blues for Alice, also written by Charlie Parker. It's really interesting we see this same exact chord progression happening in both these tunes because Conformation is a 32-bar AABA form tune, whereas Blues for Alice is just a 12-bar blues with some extra chords in it. So despite the fact that these forms are entirely different, we still have the same exact chord progression happening in the first 4 bars of each tune, where we start on the 1, and then we go down a half step, and that becomes part of our cycle of 2/5s that leads us all the way to the 4 chord in bar 5. So for the next example here, let's take this a step further, and in addition to just using those arpeggio notes, we're also going to add in some scale tones too that are diatonic to the chords. So with this next example here on Conformation, we start on the 1 chord, and I literally start with a scalar line that goes from the 5th and descends all the way down, just the major scale to the root. And then we go back up from the root, D, E, F sharp, A. So we have our root, our major third, and our 5th in there. We're connecting the root to the major third with our E, that's our scalar passing tone. In the next bar, we resolve from that A right down to the G natural, which is a really important chord tone of our C sharp half diminished 7. That's the flat 5. From there, we go flat 5, 11, or 4, the F sharp, down to our flat 3, then to our flat 9, D natural, then resolve down a half step to the C sharp over the F sharp 7 flat 9. From there, we continue going down a scale, right, from the C sharp, B, our 4th degree, down to our A sharp, the major third, and then we leap down to the F sharp, our root. We leap then again up to the root of the next chord, B minor 7, up to the B. Then we go up a scale line, B, C sharp, D, then up to F sharp. We resolve down to the root, E, leap up to the 5th of that E7, the B, down to the major third, C sharp. Then we use the 9th as a little bit of an enclosure, that F sharp. We go G sharp, F sharp, and we enclose the G natural on the A minor 7 of the next bar. That G natural is, of course, our flat 7, another very important note to resolve to and lean on that makes that chord sound, have the color that it does, the minor 7. So we go from that G up to the root, A, continue up the scale, B, C, then jump down to the A, which is the 5th of D7, down a scale, the 4th, G, down to the major third, F sharp, D, and then finally resolving to the root of the 4 chord, G. So let's just check out what this sounds like slowly now. And a little faster. So in our next example here, we're going to check out the tune Just Friends and see how we go from the 4 chord to the 4 minor. So on the first 4 bars of Just Friends here, really we start off on the 4 chord, and that happens for 2 measures. Then that 4 chord becomes minor, and we go to its corresponding 5, which really you might recognize this sound as being a backdoor to 5, which then finally resolves to the home key, the root of the tune in the bar 5 again. And you can also recognize similar bits of progressions happening not only in the first 4 bars of After You've Gone, but also we go from 4 to 4 minor in tunes like All of Me and All the Things You Are at the end as well. So in those other tunes, we see different variations. It's not 2 bars of the 4 to the 4 minor. It's just 1 bar of the 4 chord to the 4 minor. So these sounds still happen, but sometimes they happen in slight different variations. Sometimes it's a little shorter, but it's still a sound that we can get in our ears and recognize. So for this next example, I really tried to use a bit more chromaticism to add some more melodic tension throughout our lines, but we still very much prioritize the chord tones in the right spot so we hear the progression strongly throughout as well. Cool, so let's break down this line on Just Friends. So on bar 1, we start off with an enclosure, and we start off on our A major playing F to D sharp. That's a flat 13 to a sharp 11, all to just enclose our 5th E on beat 2 there. We then walk down from E to D, the 4th, down to C sharp, all clearly outlining notes within our A major scale here. We then jump down to E, the 5th, up to the 13th, F sharp, then up to B, our 9th. Then finally we start off our next bar on another enclosure. We play B flat, which is the flat 9 in relation to our chord and our root here, but we quickly resolve by going down to the G sharp, the E major 7th, and up to the root A. We continue walking up the scale, B, C sharp, E, playing 1, 2, 3, 5 there. And then we use the 4th D to resolve down by a whole step into the minor 3rd of our A minor 7. So it's very important that since we have C sharps over A major, now we lean on our C natural as we get into A minor. And it's really going to highlight the difference in quality and color of these chords. So from that C, the flat 3rd, we then go up to the 5th, E, down to the 9th, which becomes the first note of our enclosure, then playing G sharp, which is the major 7th of our A minor, to enclose back to the root A on B3 there. We then go up the scale, A, B, C, D, and then E, and we still kind of stay in A minor for the first bit of our D7 here by arpeggiating up E, G, B, and now we really kind of get into our D7 sound, which is just a little bit delayed just for more tension by resolving to the C natural, our flat 7 over D7, and then we come down on arpeggio, A, F sharp, D, C, all clearly outlining a descending D7 arpeggio there. Finally resolving to the B of our E major 7, going down to the 4th or A, scale note, then down to the 9th, our F sharp, and then some more chromaticism by playing a G natural fast, finally leading up to the G sharp, which is our major 3rd of our 1 chord E major there. So one thing that I tried to highlight here was even though we have a lot of these chromatic notes that are not within the key, they really just highlight our motion going into a note that is in the key. They function basically as just being enclosures or chromatic passing tones that even though they have tension for a second, they resolve quickly and they just add a little bit more color and a little bit more nuance, you could say, into our melodic line. So here's what this example sounds like slowly. And a little faster now. So as a quick recap, a few effective ways to help internalize these essential progressions are to first just play the roots in succession. Literally just get the sound of each root note in order. From there, we can then arpeggiate each chord and then start improvising with those arpeggio notes. Those are going to make sure that you do not leave the harmony. From there, of course, we can start adding in some diatonic scalar passing tones, and finally, then some chromatic passing tones too. So the goal here with these essential changes is to first identify them and outline them clearly and make sure that we can hear them clearly too. If we can hear them clearly, we can start to identify where they happen in other tunes and even within the same form of that tune. And then we can more easily recognize these sounds and improvise over them more fluently as well. So everything that we covered today, you can find in my latest release with JLV entitled Essential Changes. And there's even more examples and more changes in there as well. You can use the code AG5 for $5 off. That's in the description below. Thanks so much for checking it out.